It be here. Finally I am to hang. I do not know when they will come for me. I wait here in Daniel Garrett's attic. Earlier I heard my husband Thomas pay him for my keep. 12 shillings for a life. He wishes to collect before I am forgotten. Nathaniel and Rebecca Greensmith wait with me in the other room. They deserve to die. But do I? I have been convicted by a jury of learned men from Hartford and Farmington. They say that I have acted in a preternatural way, and that I have made a compact with the devil to do harm to the good people around me. I don't know what they mean by these charges. How could it have come to this? I know they had no regard for me, the men at my trial. They wished to hear nothing I had to say. Not that I had the courage to speak. Never have I felt such terror. Those men frowning down at me, and then the townspeople behind me calling me a witch. Thomas and I agreed he would not speak up to defend me for fear of bringing harm to himself and our 4 children. Our children. Sarah, Benjamin, Joseph, and my dear little Hannah. If it were not for them, I would not care if I lived or died. I'd be weary of this world. But how they need a mother. Of course, I am easily replaced. Thomas can have his pick of the widows in the village. That Mary Andrews already has his eye on him. But I think she will be a good mother. How will they remember me? Will they remember me? I have tried to be a good mother, a good wife, a good person. I am not learned, but surely there is more to life than that, although those with learning seem to have much power over the rest of us. I'm not holy enough for the church, but I have tried to live a godly life. It was my Christian duty to bring that good wife Bailey before the magistrates to answer for her witchery. I told the Reverend Hooker what I knew about her, that deceitful, filthy, sinful woman. But now Reverend Hooker and Samuel Willis say that I am a witch, having lived a life full of sin and weakness. They say that my sinfulness and the sinfulness of others have brought disaster and pestilence upon the community. And indeed, they may be right. God is angry. For 2 years, awful illness has taken the lives of young and old, and the crops have failed for 2 years straight. Last year, floods overcame the fields, killing everything. Floods, like in the Bible. Perhaps God is trying to once again rid this world of human sin and pride and wickedness. But I have never entertained the devil. Or have I? After so many days in this cold room by myself, I must wonder. Perhaps I have been in his power. I have committed unchristian acts. I have had unchristian thoughts. I have been impatient with my neighbors and my children. Perhaps he is at work in me. Oh, if that is so, I truly fear the future. Oh, dear God, let me swing from the gallows. Let me be buried in unsacred ground with no ceremony, with no kind word, but oh, please, let me watch down on my children from heaven, and let me be reunited with them when their time comes. Do not let them be harmed because their mother is a witch. Huh? What can I say to them? The last words from their mother. Oh, I love you. I'd be so proud of you. Care for each other and listen to your father. And keep to yourself. My tongue and my deeds have made me a host for the devil, and now I must pay. Oh, dear God, spare them my fate.
My name is Andy Versosa. I'm the Executive Director of Stanley-Whitman House. Today is January 7th, and I am here with Virginia Wolf of Herstory Theater. And this is one of 3 presentations that we're doing here at the museum in anticipation of January 25th, which is the 358th anniversary of the day that Mary Barnes, resident of Farmington, was hanged. So, Virginia, or may I call you Ginny?
Please do.
Welcome to Stanley-Whitman House. We've already did a little work here earlier.
Yes.
Do you want to let folks know what we were doing a little bit ago?
Yes, well, we filmed an excerpt from Panic in Connecticut, Accused Witches Have Their Say, and it's the Mary Barnes excerpt. The play itself brings to life 5 different women who were accused of witchcraft in 17th century Connecticut. But Mary Barnes is the nearest and dearest to my heart. And she's also the one of the 5 that we know the littlest about. And I sort of refer to the excerpt that you just saw as her gallows speech. We don't have a lot of historic factual background on her, but what we do know is that she was hanged, that she left 4 children, and that's a real human story, a very human story about a woman facing her death, and that's what we brought to life in this excerpt.
So let's talk a little bit about what information there would have been from that time period, which would have been 1662, 1663, right, when she was accused and hanged. Mm-hmm. What information there was, and then how you went about improvising or creating this narrative, this story.
Mm-hmm. We know the personalities around her circumstances. We know that she was married to Thomas Barnes, who gave land to the town for the Memento Mori cemetery. We know who the magistrates, the clergy, Thomas Hooker, Samuel Willis were, and we have enough information, other circumstances of witchcraft trials here in Connecticut, to be able to put together what might have been. We don't know why she was accused, what she did to bring it upon her. We know that she was accused of adultery when she was a younger woman living in Pequot Plantation, which I think is now New Haven, and then came here to Farmington, We know Thomas, her husband, was part of the church. She was not. But that wasn't uncommon, really, at the time. It was a very patriarchal society, so not that women weren't members of the church, but... and so by taking all those different circumstances together, we know that she was hanged. We know that she wasn't buried here. She was hanged. The gallows were in Hartford. She was probably dumped into a mass, I won't even call it a grave, a hole in the ground, because at the time, what we do know is that while there's a lot of subversive things going on, really the Puritans at the time, I don't think they even called themselves Puritans, but the people at the time, they truly did believe in God, believed in the devil, believed that the devil was working against God, and that they had to search out the devil and get rid of the devil to keep their community safe. And witches were a thriving part of the biblical history and the religious history of the people that came here and settled. And so it was not uncommon for them when things were going wrong. And as Mary Barnes says, sickness had been taking, that early 1660s was a very frightful time. And they were looking for why things were going wrong, and looking for reasons for it, looking where the devil was working and how the devil was working. So we don't know what she did. Was she really outspoken? Was she seen muttering to herself? Was she seen wishing harm upon neighbors? None of that. There's no transcription. And there are transcriptions like that for other people that were accused.
So when you do your interpretation of how you'll portray her, what things do you rely on to give you that space to be her?
The general terror of the experience of having been accused of witchcraft, and she herself did accuse someone else. And at one point she says, how could it have come to this? Because she thought she was doing right by accusing Goody Bailey and bringing Bailey to the courts and saying this, and now it's turned on her, and she's been accused. So I think there was certainly terror and confusion and kind of disbelief that now it's on me, and the horror of the fact that this actually came to fruition, that she's going to die, nothing's going to save her. Her husband didn't speak up for her, because the easiest way to be accused of witchcraft is to be associated with someone accused of witchcraft. So already being married or the child of someone accused was bad enough, much less stepping up and defending someone. So just thinking about what that was like. She had been jailed for 3 weeks, and jail at the time was, well, not that jail's great now, but if your family didn't have any means, you starved. You had no bedding, you had no food, you had no drink, you had no clothing. You had what they threw you into this room, and it wasn't a jail cell, it was a room in somebody's house that has been designated. So perhaps the person in whose home you're in would be kind, but you didn't know. And so you're all alone. You're all alone in this cold room and left with your thoughts. Quite often, there's stories of how townspeople would come and demand that you tell who else was a witch with you. So a lot of emotional badgering, or even emotional torture, perhaps. We don't really know what she went through. I don't believe she was put to the water test, but that all of that fear, the uncertainty, and the self-doubt. I mean, she believes in witches. She believes in the devil. She doesn't think she met with the devil, but who knows? The devil takes many different forms. The fear and the uncertainty they had back then was overwhelming. But then being there by herself, waiting to be taken to the gallows. And what are your last thoughts? Who are you thinking about?
I think that's a unique moment to portray, that gallows kind of speech that you're giving, for that what you had once called a soliloquy. Yeah. So with Mary Barnes, you're from Farmington, so I'm presuming that when you were here you first learned of Mary Barnes. Could you talk a little bit about how you became aware of the witchcraft trials in Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic because I was born in Salem, Massachusetts. So I knew all about Salem, and I grew up next door to Salem in Marblehead. So it wasn't until coming here and actually working with Lisa Johnson, the previous director here at the Stanley-Whitman House. She'd written a play about the preternatural way, the witchcraft trial of Mary Barnes, and I didn't know. I didn't know that any witchcraft panic had happened here in Connecticut. So that was enlightening. And in the beginning, it was purely selfish. I mean, what a great role, this woman who's on trial for witchcraft. But working with her and with the cast and bringing that play to life, it's like, well, she was one of 11 who were killed and one of 40-something who were accused. And what kind of stories are there? And that led me to researching the different backgrounds and all of that, and trying to figure out how can I didn't know anything about this. How can I get this? How can I get the word out? How can I bring this back to life? So which led me to doing enough research to put together a play, a one-woman show, which I'm not a historian and I'm not a playwright, but the passion for the project brought that together. So really, and then that ended up, I established Herstory Theater because I needed to now market this play that I had written and wanted to perform. And so it all happened right here at the Stanley-Whitman House. That's where Herstory Theater was basically founded. And it's a fascinating historical study. And it's been really interesting to take this play where I bring to life 5 women who were accused of witchcraft. And when I met here with Lisa and with Walt Woodward, the state historian, on this project that they were doing back in, I think it was 2007.
Right.
And Facebook was brand new. Facebook was, not much was happening. And I got home and I went on Facebook because, that's when we did. It wasn't a scary place. And it said something about, what's on your mind? And I put down Connecticut Witchcraft Trials. And a high school classmate of mine who lives in Colorado jumped in and she said, my great however many grandmother was accused twice. And Mary Staples. So Mary Staples became my narrator for the full show. And she was accused in 1663 and then she was accused in 1693. Fascinating woman. And survived the whole thing. So now I've been doing it a lot for museums and historic societies and libraries and getting into some of the schools, part of Hartford Performs, and now, of course, it's been very calm in the time of COVID, but hopefully later in 2021 I can bring it back up.
Not a calm period.
No, it's not been calm, but I haven't been donning my corset very much.
We're grateful that you did today. So when we think about museums and the roles that museums play in history and why it's important, why does it matter? Can you talk about, because you're fully engaged in this project that you've been doing for how many years?
Yeah, for 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So why is this so important?
Well, first of all, I think it's just really important to know where we came from and to understand where we came from. And the whole thing about the witchcraft panics, and it's something that I try to, especially when I'm working with students, make sure they know that what life was like in the 1600s, that they weren't a bunch of wackos going around just accusing people of witchcraft out of the blue, that this was a part of their religious philosophy and theology, this belief system. The Bible had said, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. So they weren't a bunch of crazies. And in fact, the magistrates, the clergy, Harvard graduates, they were the most well-educated and intelligent people in the New World who were behind this and making sure that the communities were rid from the devil. But what's really...
So the devil really was perceived to be...
Oh, alive and well and at work. Absolutely. And what's interesting with Mary Barnes, and as I was rehearsing for this, I realized and I did write this, but it all came from places of research. She talks about God is angry. There's 2 different things. God is angry and the devil's at work. and they don't really intersect. God's angry, that's why there's floods, that's why there's illness, and yet where does the devil come in versus God? That doesn't get addressed, which it's like, ooh, I might need to start thinking about that one. There's a lot of theology there that's beyond my experience. But then you look at the witchcraft panics and the fear people have, and we're recording this the first week in January, and we saw what happened in Washington, D.C. this week. And we saw what fear can do to a group of people. And the people that stormed Washington, stormed the buildings, they weren't, much as people might want to generalize, they weren't all a bunch of ignorant yahoos. There were a lot of very smart, intelligent people who, whether it's mob mentality or the belief, fear of things being taken away, the devil at work, really. I mean, that's where we are. Our political parties each think the other is the devil at work. So things haven't changed.
So history is important to look at the context, the things that we can learn today in our lives today, drawing those parallels.
And to understand how some things happen, because history does repeat itself.
So let me actually just to drill down a little further about the audience. When you do your play, do you see light bulbs going off in their eyes?
Yeah.
Do you see this kind of awareness or consciousness that happens?
I mean, it's sort of on two different levels. First of all, there's a level of people had no idea that Connecticut had this history. And it's funny to go to historic societies or libraries and there's so many people that don't know that we even had it. So that's the first light bulb that goes off, is I had no idea we were doing this. And then the second one is then trying to bring those correlations together. And always somebody says, things haven't really changed. And you get a good discussion going. And you can with kids too. It takes maybe a little bit more prompting, but just the simple bullying and scapegoating. And everybody's been on each side of that. And then also with kids, I like to historically say, okay, look at the witches, the Halloween witches. Let's see what that is and what actually came from history. And, the fact that women were the herbalists and their Halloween witch over a cauldron. And the women kept house and the Halloween witch with the broom. And all of these things, the witch's hat, which women at the time always had the headgear on, that it's not that far away. Even the warts on a witch. One of those tests for being witch is if you had a witch's teat, a mark where the devil may have given suck. So, and women they were stripped naked and they went looking for witches' teats. Well, any woman over the age of 30 is going to have a wart, a mole, a skin tag. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, lots of light bulbs going off, and it always ends up being interesting conversation. And whenever there's a descendant of someone who is accused of witchcraft, that's also really interesting. What their take on it? Are they ashamed? Are they proud? Are they just simply interested? Has the family swept it aside and are they embarrassed and don't want to talk about it? Or is it a badge of honor? Everybody's take is different.
I think in these times, looking at how the witches were accused and how they were hanged and what happened and how, to a greater extent, how this history has been erased and now is being put back together through work such as yourself or Beth Caruso, who does historical novels, or Tony Grigo, who keeps up a Facebook page for the Connecticut Witch Memorial. I think that this is excellent work. I've been very pleased to be engaged with you all as the new director here at Stanley-Whitman House, and to carry on what I think is a great work.
Well, thank you. But I think it's so important to become a repository for this work, for this information, and we don't have that yet. Everything is scattered everywhere, and some people know about it. It's never taught in schools, but Connecticut history is not really taught in
So
schools.
why don't you think it's taught in schools? Is it too hard?
I don't even know. I think, I don't know. I'm not an educator, and my kids are long out of elementary school,
But you are going into schools.
I am going into schools, and it's interesting. I've been my schooling experience has been in the Hartford school system, where there are a lot of children of color and of immigrant families, and I learned early on that I had to teach myself as I went in, and I realized here I am, this white woman in a classroom full of colored children who come from all over the world and whose families that I introduce it saying, we're talking about the 1600s, and even if your family didn't come over on the Mayflower, they didn't live here in New England, they were not white people here in New England, the science was the same everywhere, and wherever your family was from, there still is a belief system in a good and in a bad, a god, a devil, myths and stories and all of that, and we were all in the same place back then. Nobody understood about germs. Nobody understood about bacteria.
This is basically medieval.
Yeah.
Coming out of the medieval ages.
Exactly.
The time of enlightenment is just not quite here yet, or just happening.
Exactly. Because, making that connection with kids is probably not easy no matter what. But I very quickly and naively, realized that me coming in there in this full dress and telling them a story that seems so very far away from any of their experience or anything was not going to work. That I needed to connect them somehow to the story. Hopefully.
So Stanley-Whitman House has done for many years, due to the work of my predecessor and a number of volunteers, has done a lot of living history.
Yes.
And of which you have been a part of. And I think that's what has attracted me to Stanley-Whitman House and this work. And when you make a connection, when you're performing, you're kind of bringing to the table all of yourself. You're an actor. And I think that's that creative kind of energy and that creating that time and space through theater, drama is really fascinating. And to do that in person, live, is again, to me, fascinating.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. During this time of COVID, we can't meet. So
Right.
you haven't been able to take this play out on the road. You haven't been able to go to schools. And here we are. This might be the first time that you did the play.
This year, I think I probably did. I think I did in the schools in January. Because I always tried to say, this is not a Halloween play. So I will come in October if you want me to, exactly.
Sure.
But, January is a good time because we tie, I can tie it in with the anniversary. So I think I probably did it somewhere in January.
A year ago.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we were talking briefly, and we know that theater, things won't go back to the way they were. And you said something really wonderful.
Yeah, I give credit to me, Hunter Arnold, who said it. He said, theater's not coming back, it's moving forward. And I love that.
So we're not going to necessarily go back to how, say, plays were looked at fully. We're going to bring forward this experience of doing things on Zoom, online.
Make it so much more accessible. I think that's the beauty of what this has done, is it now we know that we can make it more accessible, and it gets exciting to think about we can make it more accessible. I had never considered it. I thought, I just would take my basket full of props and go around as far as I can drive. But I need to sit down and rethink this. And, I'm aging out of Mary Barnes. So maybe now what I need to do is put it on film and be able to reach around the world. Sounds really bombastic, but reach far away with this story and not be relied upon to get dressed up and drive in a corset all over New England.
Taking a show on the road.
Yeah, exactly.
So you must have something in the works where how you might develop this and do this. Is there anything you could share with us?
It's just the things are percolating, and this time of COVID has. it's just making you think outside the box, which is not a strength of mine. Frankly, it's made me, all of a sudden I'll be going down one path. I was like, wait a minute, I can do this whether it's technologically, sitting on my computer and finding out some new way to present something, or even just personally and for Herstory Theater. It doesn't, I can go back and do it the way I've been doing it, but I don't have to, and maybe I shouldn't, and I might be left in the dust if that's what I do. So I'm really spending a lot of time thinking about this, the way forward. And it's very exciting.
Well, I know here for Stanley-Whitman House, who'd have thought would be in the lean-to, filming something to be shared online.
It was a perfect place. It was a perfect space.
Oh, and where we filmed you earlier,
Yeah.
up in the attic of the lean-to.
Yeah.
Nice and creepy, right?
Didn't even know it was there. There's nails coming out of the ceiling. I mean, like, and they're probably 17th century nails. Well, 18th century nails, I suppose.
Yeah, a little later.
Yeah.
A little later, period. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing the work that you do, number one, and then doing that and sharing it with us and helping us to do a program to mark the occasion of the 358th anniversary of Mary Barnes. And, you know, we'll see what we do next year, and hopefully you'll help us with that.
Oh, no, I'd love to. It's important. It's important to commemorate the time, the history, the stories. It's important to tell the stories. That's all theater is. It's telling stories. So if we can do it without making somebody look at a computer, unless it's at a performance or whatever it might be, it's worth it. So I'm so glad you're pulling this together. It's great.
Wonderful. So we will have a panel. The panel will be on Monday, January 25th at 7 p.m. It'll be a pre-recorded panel, but after the panel is done, there'll be a live Zoom hosted kind of Q&A.
Yeah.
So, and you'll entertain questions and hear people's comments. Along with Beth Caruso and Tony Grigo. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the 25th of January.
Thank you.